Good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Anthony Kazazis, and I am the director of the NYC Network Group, as well as the NYC Real Estate Expo. And I want to thank everybody for registering for today's webinar on sales and operations for new development, sponsored by DMG Investments. DMG Investments was founded in 2013 and is headquartered in New York. DMG Investments is a leading global real estate investment management and development firm focusing on student housing, condominium, multifamily, and modular construction. By combining the joint expertise of their talented people, they are able to offer clients a vertical integrated investment platform resulting in outstanding reliability and the prospect of shared growth. In part one, November 5th, DMG put together a panel, Modular Housing and New Innovations in Construction. November 19th, part two, DMG had their second panel, New Directions of F&A, that's Finance and Acquisitions in Multifamily Assets. Now, part three, DMG will have their final panel of their Winter Webinar Series, Sales and Operations for New Developments. Their panelists will discuss overview sales records of new development in New York City and New Jersey, challenges and opportunities for new development in the tri-state area, new sales and marketing strategies for better promotions, operation challenges and new developments in multifamily residential leasing, how to balance and combine sales, marketing, and operations. And after the panel, there'll be Q&A. Today's guest panelists are Kent Swig, President of Swig Equities, Paul J. Massey Jr., Founding Partner and Chief Executive Officer of B6 Real Estate Advisors, Taryn Byron, President and Broker of C.J. Dalton, as well as the Lead Real Estate Consultant at DMG Invest, Christian Olone, Vice President of Asset Management at DMG Investments, and our moderator, Richard Lorenzen, Chief Executive Officer at Fifth Avenue Brands. At this time, I'd like to have each panelist just give a short 1-minute introduction on themselves. And let's start off with Richard.
Sure. Thanks, Anthony. My name is Richard Lorenzen. Great to be here with everybody this morning. I'm excited to be moderating this event today. I'm the CEO of Fifth Avenue Brands. We're a public relations firm based in New York City, and we specialize in representing clients in the real estate and financial services spaces.
Thank you, Richard. Taryn?
Hi, my name is Taryn Byron. I am the president and broker of record for C.J. Dalton, a real estate company in New Jersey's Gold Coast, specializing in luxury residential sales and new developments, both in multifamily leasing and sales. We represent DMG as their lead real estate consultant, and I also have the pleasure of serving as the sales director for DMG's condominium project, One Park Condos in Cliffside Park. It is a 204-unit condominium building that is perched atop the Palisades on New Jersey's Gold Coast. Every single one of our homes has outdoor space, 25,000 square feet of 5-star amenities, and it's really an incredible building.
Wow, sounds nice. Kent Swig?
Yeah, hi, it's Kent Swig. I am president of Swig Equities, which is an owner-developer of real estate throughout New York City and the tri-state area and San Francisco. I'm also an owner of a couple operating companies, including Brown Harris Stevens, which is a residential firm, a Helmsley Spear, which is commercial, Falcon Pacific, which is a construction company for both ground up and interior construction work. And then I'm a principal in my family's business, which is the Swig Company. We own about 10 million square feet of office space around the United States.
Thank you, Quint. Paul?
Thanks, Anthony. Paul Massey. I'm the CEO of B6, which is a commercial investment sales and debt brokerage firm. B6 stands for building by building, block by block, which speaks to our dense urban market model. We cover each neighborhood in the 5 boroughs in New Jersey and Westchester. So the metro area, selling buildings and providing debt for refinancing construction loans and equity.
Thank you, Paul. Christian.
Morning. Thank you, Anthony. My name is Christian Olone. I'm the Vice President of Asset Management for DMG Investments. I oversee the leasing operations, the facilities maintenance of all of our operating properties, including our student housing portfolio, our condo building One Park, and new developments and upcoming developments for DMG Investments. So with that, I'd like to just jump into a quick presentation of DMG Investments to share specifically our student housing portfolio. So as Anthony mentioned, we were founded in 2013. We started with condo building, specifically in condo development. Since then, we've really transitioned to developing student housing product and communities across the country. We've been very successful with that, and I wanted to just discuss quickly our coronavirus guidance. I know that's a topic that's near and dear to everyone on the call's hearts, and it's really important to us to make sure that we're providing guidance and leadership in that area. So we developed an in-house coronavirus guidance called our Auden Living Clean program, where we implemented a operating standard and procedures for all of our student housing properties and communities across the country that meet the expectations for the CDC, as well as state and local guidelines. Make sure that we're providing best-in-class services for our residents and students, but also have that peace of mind for any partners that we have with those universities. Our portfolio is comprised of a diverse set of properties across the country, including Albany, Ithaca, Cornell University, Auden Houston at U of H and TSU, Auden Upstate in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is our newest entry. It delivered in August of 2020 with a very successful occupancy rate, even during a COVID era. We have a really exciting property right now coming online in 2021 in Buffalo, and two in the pipeline that are actively being developed, in another one in Albany and an additional asset in Ithaca. We have several properties in the pipeline in pre-development stages as well. So it's a very exciting time for development right now. Some overarching facts of Auden Living. We've got 5 operating properties right now in 5 different markets. We have 532 units with over 1,300 beds. Our pipeline is really exciting. We're almost going to be doubling our bed count in about the space of 2 years here. So really exciting development opportunities for us, and we see a lot of positivity in our student housing portfolio. Some specifics about our portfolio. So Auden Albany is located in Albany, right across from SUNY Albany. It's 322 beds, opened in 2018. Auden Upstate, as I mentioned, it's our newest property here, opened in August of 2020, and that's in Spartanburg, Carolina. It's adjacent to the university, just a really prime location for us, and just a really, really stellar community there. Auden Houston, so we renovated this property and conducted a value add project there in 2019, and was very successful turning that property and are achieving higher rents due to the efforts that we had there. Same story for Auden Ithaca. We took over this property and conducted a renovation project. Are getting great rental rates right now, and even are seeing very high occupancy levels during COVID, due in part to our COVID Clean Living program, and also the really stable market that we're seeing through Cornell University. Auden Buffalo, as I mentioned, is our newest development. It's going to be opening August of 2021. We see a lot of encouraging signs from the Buffalo market, and we're really excited to deliver this product. It's on time, on track to deliver on time. So just a really, really stellar project, 481 beds, 154 units. It's going to be a really singular property in that market. We're always looking for new opportunities, and I hope that you reach out and connect with us. We have a broad range of services that we provide, from finance and acquisitions to construction, property management services as well. So we're always looking for new partners, and we hope to connect with you soon.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Christian. Very well done. This was some great information regarding DMG's products and services that you guys offer. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you our moderator, Richard Lorenzen.
Thanks, Anthony. So for our first question, Ken, I wanted to go to you and kind of get your thoughts on the overall lay of the land. Could you tell us your views on the current state of the residential market?
Sure. First of all, we've gone through, as we're going through, a very rough period of time. with COVID. So it's my heart goes out to everybody who's been affected by that. The residential marketplace in New York City has been interesting. I would say pricing, transaction volume is probably down about 50% plus or minus over the COVID period. Although the third quarter of this year, right? So third quarter of COVID versus third quarter pre-COVID has shown a lot of activity going on. So in the one bedroom, the studio bedroom particularly, there's almost 80% increase in volume over the year previous. So I think what we're seeing is that prices have declined, and the merry-go-round of getting on to own a home in New York City has slowed down. So when it's going very fast, you jump on the merry-go-round, you get hit hard from one of the little horses if you don't jump perfectly. Now that it's slowed down a bit and becomes a little bit more affordable, people are entering the marketplace, a lot of first-time buyers. So I think they're recognizing that there's an opportunity out in the marketplace to come in because prices have fallen. And I would remind us that the third quarter did not have any kind of vaccine on the horizon at the time. So these were people who were seeing through the COVID environment pre the announcement of a vaccine. Now with the vaccine, I think we're seeing a lot more activity here, and we're heading towards a little bit more stability in the marketplace.
So Taryn, with that said, how have you seen buyers' purchasing behavior shift during COVID?
Well, I think that buyers have access to a lot more information nowadays. And when they are looking for a home, they want to go through this personal vetting process themselves. So the way that we actually market to buyers, especially during COVID, has changed. We've had to be able to sell without doing property tours in many occasions, and give the buyers that magical feeling that they get when they walk into their next home for the first time without ever having them walk into the home. So we've been able to do that, especially at One Park, very thoughtfully by leveraging technology, virtual tours, videos. And it was a very simple process on our end because we had already had experience in working with international buyers that were not even in this country. So we used a lot of those same tools when we were marketing to buyers. And we're also finding, as Kent mentioned, a lot more first-time home buyers in the market. Interest rates are very low, and people who were on the fence or even in roommate situations are now like, oh, wait, I don't know where my roommate has been. So let me go and see if I can find my own home and actually own a piece of real estate now. It's very exciting.
Christian, what would be some examples then of consumer changes and how it's informed some of the upcoming marketing efforts that DMG has been doing?
Yeah, one thing that we've been really in tune with is understanding what the consumer is talking about and is concerned about, and how we can cater our marketing messages to appeal to those concerns, right? So when someone goes to buy something, they're typically looking to address an immediate need that they have. And as Taryn mentioned, we're seeing buyers that are and consumers that are looking for some outdoor space. They're looking for privacy and controlled environment settings. So we're catering messages and packaging those to really amplify, how we can accommodate those needs. For example, at One Park with all of our outdoor amenity space, private balconies, the gardens that we have there. We're really amplifying those to make sure that first-time buyers or even potential investors understand that that's something that they can now get now that that's a concern. In a pre-COVID setting, maybe that messaging was different. We really went more for our amenity package and our 25,000 square feet of top flight amenities. Now that has shifted to they want to be able to control their environments. They want to have that privacy. And ensure that the services that they're getting are always vetted. So we're also seeing that on the service side as well, and ensuring that our operations match the level of concern that and all the best guidance that we have out there regarding COVID prevention. And that seems to be still what the consumers are concerned about, is how are we protecting our communities and mitigating risk on a daily basis. And so we're keeping our consumers informed. We're keeping our residents informed about the practices that we're doing, in hopes that information and solid information will inform best practices and positive behaviors for our consumers.
Makes sense. So I'm also curious about land itself. I think that that's something that would be interesting to a lot of developers. Paul, two-part question to you. What have you seen happen to land pricing in 2020, and where do you see demand going in 2021?
Well, thanks, Richard. First of all, it's great to be here with everybody. Thank you to Anthony for getting us together. Everyone in the industry loves what you do with your expos and your events, and just bringing people together to talk and learn is great. I'm happy to be here with the DMG folks, and Kent's an old friend, so I'm in this crowd. I'm probably the least expert about the topic of development, but we do track land, which might be a little bit of a crystal ball into what happens down the road, Richard. So interestingly, citywide, the top of the market in recent history was 2015 for development, and a couple of big things have happened. They're obvious, you know what they are, but we had an oversupply of condos in the super luxury category, and then we had our virus. So we went down from a high of 500 development sites selling citywide to last year, 2019, because of perception of oversupply, to 187 from 500. And people were starting to dust themselves off and realizing that oversupply was just in the super luxury end of things. We have a fundamental housing shortage in the city. So Q1 of 2020 was actually picking up volume. So we're going to end up with 205 development sites, roughly, because the year is not quite over, selling. So an actual uptick from 2019, way below the high bar. But we're seeing development sites in the boroughs selling to people who have a view of New York that it's going to come back. We're going to get vaccinated. We're going to be back in business. So I think, very interestingly, as rough as it's been, we're on an upward trajectory in terms of new development. So I think you're going to see more opportunity as a developer. On the pricing side, the high was also in 2015. Citywide price per buildable foot of development sites was $285. Because of the luxury oversupply, that dipped to $252. And the virus has really slammed prices. Banks are conservative. People are dealing with their own imbalance and issues that they have. So we're projecting that from a high of $280 a buildable to last year, which was down to $252, we're projecting potentially price per buildable foot under $200. Which is really astounding. So you can guess where we think it's going to go from here. And I believe it's going to start trending up. But if now is not a buy opportunity, I don't know what is.
Hey, Kent, what do you think about the impact that COVID has had on the market overall over this past year?
Residentially or commercially? Why don't we take commercial for a second?
Sure.
So first of all, we have to take a look at the marketplace and see what is going to last beyond COVID. So our masks and social distancing, in my opinion, will not last beyond COVID. Once we get the vaccine, once people feel safe, once we are safe, I think that goes away. Certain aspects are going to impact ourselves. So working from home is one of the biggest issues that people are talking about. For the first 3 months of the COVID, starting in March, the United States industry of workers was fairly productive. In fact, very productive. That productivity has diminished after the first 3 months. It's gone down. So we now know in terms of efficiency that it doesn't really work well to be outside the office full time. On the other hand, when we get back and we're back in offices, there are some reasons to work from home occasionally. So if you one day a week want to work from home because you're buried with emails and you want to be efficient and you just want to get your emails out of the way and you don't want to disturb your office, you could be pretty efficient with that way. But the one thing that we do know is that creativity, opportunity, and networking is diminished, if not gone, by not being in an office. So you can tell a story of there's a guy from BlackRock that was in the equity place and he wanted to be in the debt side. He reported every day to his boss. He did all his work. He did very well, but he had no networking capability, so he could never really go call. He had to cold call his boss's colleague, who's right next door in the office from him, but he wasn't in the office, so he finally got frustrated, left, and chose a different path. But those are the kind of things that they're very limiting in what's going on. And I think a good example of that is if you look at Facebook, which has 1.5 million square feet in the Hudson Yards, of which they have not occupied the space yet, it's still under construction. In the middle of the pandemic, in July, they took an additional 730,000 square feet at Farley Office Building. So this is the company that said they're not going to have workers come back until June 2021. And they took from 1.5 million square feet they haven't occupied to it for another 730,000 square feet. So I think that the trend of office space is not going away. And have we been hit? Yes. But overall, I think that we're in pretty good shape going forward as an office user.
So to follow up on that, Taryn, what impact have you seen on the new development, even specifically on the condo side of the market during COVID?
Well, it's been very interesting, and I bring this up because I like to talk about the resiliency of the people of this area. I mean, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, the tri-state area, we are some tough people. And if you guys think back to almost about 20 years ago now, 9/11 happened. And everyone said, no one's ever going to want to live in the city again, terrorist attacks, all that stuff. Well, here we are. Up until this pandemic, Manhattan was still very much alive. It's not that the city died after that. I think that there's been a temporary shift, and a lot of people kind of thought, oh, I'm never going to have to go to work ever again and report to my office, or maybe go in a couple days a week. And that may very well be the case for some people. But overall, I think employers are going to still want a butt in a seat Monday through Friday because of productivity issues. So we did see this kind of almost mass exodus, but I think we're going to see a lot of people returning to the city and returning to the suburbs of Manhattan very close. So it'll be interesting to see how that shift happens once we kind of return to quote unquote normal, because we're going to have a new sense of normal. And what that looks like, I think, is going to be very interesting. But just in general, I feel like there's these blips and bumps that happen along the way. And we have kind of this natural aversion to change in general as people. So we get fearful, and our gut reaction is to go do something about it. And a lot of people moved out of the city, but I think a lot of people are definitely going to come back. So there's not a death of Manhattan or a death of, New Jersey's Gold Coast. That's something I definitely want to, say that I don't foresee that happening. Maybe the market has softened, but I think we were due for that anyway.
You know what, Taryn, it's interesting. We had, we're friendly with a historian whose name is Kevin Draper. And we had him come in and give our sales crew a talk at one of our regular morning meetings. And he has this speech that he gives about the fact that this isn't the first New York City pandemic, that there have actually been 4 pandemics before. And it was fascinating and uplifting. And he wasn't a salesman-y, schmaltzy kind of guy, but he just laid out the facts. And every century had a pandemic. I think the 1600s was cholera, typhoid fever in the 1700s, then you had the Spanish flu in 1918. But he delineated the fact that, at every one of those inflection points, people were bailing out of the city right and left. But yet, anywhere from a year to 2 years later, the people came rushing back into the city, and there was this euphoria. And like, by example, the 1918 Spanish flu was followed by the Roaring 20s, which were a time in the city where the economy was booming, people were out socializing, and you can see it happening again. I'm really enthusiastic about, first of all, very happy that we're going to get the people who are most vulnerable vaccinated right away. But the city, if you really look at the charts of where land prices are and investments are, and we're in for a really good time, I think, moving forward.
I agree. And I think, the development world, from a developer's kind of mindset, developers work counter-cyclically. So this is the time to purchase land and to get into the market for a new development opportunity, because if you look at the timeline from acquisition to sellout, you're looking at a minimum of a 2-3 year timeline there between your approvals and everything. So it'll be very interesting to see all the properties that got scooped up and what people are going to do with them.
Yeah, we're seeing some really interesting things happening around the city. Everyone knows that it's not a big secret that land prices in the Bronx were traditionally half of what they were in Brooklyn and Queens. So there was always that dichotomy, but that shift is narrowing. And we're looking at developers who are thinking about what's the market going to be like 4 years from now in the Bronx, when you've got great infrastructure, you've got good communities, and so we're seeing people making bets that are counter-cyclical, especially in the boroughs.
So, Paul, let me ask you then: if land prices have corrected and we're at a lower cost basis, what do you think that means for new development as we move forward, 2021, even 2022?
Well, I think Kent would know better than I would, but I don't know how construction prices have reacted during this time. Is that another opportunity? It all needs to add up, right? You have to have the basis and the property. You have to be able to build affordably, and you have to have rents that make the math work.
Well, I tell you, the development sites, up to certainly 2015 and a little bit post, were all sold as condominiums, because there was no way that you really could afford the development sites and build to a rental. So that was a problem. But going back in, construction prices are actually increased during COVID right now, and which seems odd, but if you look at the logistics of deliveries and the schedule of delays and other things, it actually drove costs up a little bit. I do think going forward now, you're going to see, for new bidding, you're going to see costs go down. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of construction companies that are very hungry for business, including ours. And I think they're going to be pricing very, very narrowly. On the other hand, there have been some companies that have gone under because they didn't make it through this environment. So I think you've got fewer companies doing some of the work. So it'll be interesting. I do believe that prices on land are going to decline a little bit. Prices on construction will decline a little bit, whether soft costs do or not. Interest rates certainly, but whether other soft costs do is still open for debate. And then hopefully we can gain back and start building some rental housing, because the city, as you said, Paul, earlier, the city is in desperate need for more housing, especially rental housing. And a lot of the development occurred at the super luxury end, which is a very razor-thin market at best. There's only 2,500 billionaires in the world. How many of them who don't have an apartment here really want an apartment and are going to buy one? Although these developers, especially along 57th Street, started building for all of those people that don't really exist. And that's what hit the marketplace a little bit prior to COVID. So hopefully I'm cautiously optimistic that we can regain some footing in some of the much needed housing for real people with real jobs doing real work.
And I think that's pretty, thoughtful. And I think what has happened through COVID is people have taken the time, because they've had the time now, to pause and say, okay, wait, we have to re-strategize. We have to rethink this. Even one of the kind of initiatives that DMG is taking is modular housing. So I'm very interested to see how much modular housing comes into play and to the forefront for more affordable style development, especially in the rental space.
Hey, Christian, are there any new metrics that have emerged, especially during the pandemic, that DMG is now looking at when they consider a new development?
Yeah, so there's, we always look at, the key fundamentals of the market space anytime we go into a new market. So one thing that we're really keen on right now is making sure that there's long-term growth in population, and something that's going to be resilient to lockdowns or potential shifts in kind of day-to-day operations of someone's business or something like that. So we look for companies in that area and businesses that are resilient to shifts like that, that have good track records, because they're going to be able to supply our investments and our buildings with renters that are going to be there for long-term and have long-term demand. That may not have been something that we considered or had weighted as heavily in the past, just due to the fact that we didn't have to be concerned with the pandemic, right? Population shifts we could look at trends and, be very secure on those. But now we're looking into what are some specific, backgrounds of the companies and the reasons that those individuals are coming to that area, and relocating, and what the sustainability of that is. So, that's something that we're keyed in on, specifically for short-term view. Again, as we've mentioned, long-term, post-pandemic, post-vaccine, we don't think that that's going to be something we're having to weight as heavily again. But it's something that with the additional research, we're definitely layering in kind of an additional understanding of those markets. And it's helped us inform, especially for programming and, the building choices and design that we're going with. It kind of informs the different levels of that investment thesis.
Have there been any areas of savings for as far as operations go during the COVID season?
Yeah, there have been some unique opportunities, and as everyone knows, there's been some unexpected expenses with the pandemic as well on the operations side. Things like additional cleaning supplies, I'm sure you've all seen like the specialized tape and antimicrobial product that's out there. So while we've had some unexpected expenses, we've had some unexpected savings as well. We've been able to reposition some of our service contracts to better reflect the services that we've been able to provide. We've been able to renegotiate some utility contracts and really just look for cost saving measures, where in a typical year we'd be doing this process anyway, but there are some real opportunities in some of those areas now, and we have more negotiating power to come to the table with because of the pandemic, and we can leverage those different stances. So those are two main ways that we've discovered that we can really trim our budgets and maximize our NOI throughout the year is ensuring that we're really negotiating those service contracts and those monthly services, and also looking at those utilities, see if we can reposition any of our contracts. I don't know if anyone's been monitoring the kind of nationwide utility pricing. We've actually had some significant opportunities earlier this year for savings, and we were able to lock in at lower rates for a lot of our supply, which is a great opportunity. And we're able to lock in for the next few years at really a discounted price because of the shift in demand.
So, Taryn, you've been on the front line of all the changes that sales and marketing and new developments have seen during the pandemic. I was wondering what examples you might have of some ways that developers and brokers have been able to up their game as far as technology goes to show and sell property over the past year.
Well, the amazing thing is that we've had these tools the entire time. It's just finding different applications for them and being creative. You know, again, this has been an opportunity for us to kind of do some soul searching on what we need to do and be proactive in doing virtual tours and providing more tech-based showings for people. We did FaceTime tours, pre-recorded tours, all of those things were things that we leveraged as a company previously. And we just thought of this as every person we're working with is an international buyer. So let's treat them as that and get them as much information as possible. But one of the unique things that we did too was we still offered in-person tours. We just had a more stringent screening process, even at the height of the pandemic where no one was going out. We were actually still offering in-person tours. We were just very creative, very careful. And I think that's gone a long way, is that human element and continuing to have those types of interpersonal relationships with people, because this socially distanced society that we're in right now, you know, as we were discussing earlier, masks and social distancing post-vaccine probably won't exist anymore. And it's because we're social beings. People want to interact with one another. That's why we're hosting things like we're doing today, is for that interaction, for that connection. And buying a home is a very emotional process. I know from the development side, it's numbers and business and does this pencil out. But from the consumer side and the buyer side of it, it's a lot of money, and it's where they're going to sleep and live and make memories. So we still have to add that human element back into it.
So we've talked a lot about residential. We've talked about commercial. Retail, of course, is another sector that's been hit, you know, really hard, disproportionately hard during the pandemic. Kent, would love if you could share some insights into what you think the current state of retail is.
First of all, it's hurting. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The restaurants and retail is in deep, deep pain right now. But if I step back a little bit and look at what was going on prior to the COVID, retail had been changing already dramatically. So I like to say, you know, what Sir Isaac Newton said, which is that matter is neither created nor destroyed, it merely changes its form. And that's what retail's doing. Retail is clearly going through a form change. So are people still buying shirts and clothing, and are they buying watches and sunglasses and all the other things that they do? Yes. Are they getting them in a different way? Absolutely. So you buy them online. Your paper product you're buying online, you don't have to go shop. So that was a change that was occurring, and prices were adjusting accordingly. So the big box users that were out there before, with the idea that, gee, I need a big Manhattan store because it's great for marketing. And if I have 100 stores around the United States and I have one in Manhattan and I lose money on that, it's like I'll chalk up the loss to marketing, and it'll benefit all my other 100 stores. That's just not happening anymore. So what's happening? We're going to end up with smaller stores. We're going to end up with more mama papa type services. So like Paris, where you go in and you have small chocolatiers, and you've got florists, and you've got great coffee places, you have great juice places. All of these things that you're not going to buy online are going to be there. And what's that going to do to New York City? It's going to make it a much more diverse, much more interesting, and much better neighborhood type place. So in essence, we're going back to some of the older type operations that we had, you know, pasta makers and all that. And it makes for a great, great opportunity. Now, are prices going down? Yes, prices are going down, and that's fine. But if you're a big office building and you've got retail, will you take a little bit of a hit? Yes, but is it going to overall impact your major building? Not so much. If you're a smaller building, you've got some issues. I will say that I think one trend that's going to be going on is the fact that you've got retailers that are out of business. restaurants that are going out of business or potentially coming back, and we'll be in a game of musical chairs. Everybody will be shifting around and moving around and starting over. So for the brokers out there, I think that there'll be a lot of activity, and people will be coming back, and restaurants will be opening, but they may not be in the same place that they were before, and then that's a shame. We've got some restaurants, the 21 Club, which we just read about, been out there, 90 years, and may not be there anymore. Those are kind of things that are devastating in the marketplace. But the resiliency of the New York City marketplace, the resiliency of the young population who are, who have been less than careful in some cases with COVID, are itching to come back, and so we will see activity, we will see strength, we will see opportunity, but granted, it will be at a different price.
So just a reminder to everybody watching, if there's a question that you want to ask one of the panelists, you can submit your questions through the Q&A forum that's at the bottom of the screen here. I see we have a bunch of questions coming in, so in a few minutes.
One other thing I was just going to say on retail, what I think also, which in this Paul may be able to comment on, I think what's going on is that you have retail tenants out. You've had, and some residential people out. So you've had smaller buildings that would never have been in a development type of opportunity before, where you can start assembling. I think this is going to create opportunities for buildings that all of a sudden they've lost some of their tenants. They've gotten tenants out that they never thought they could get out. And an alternative that didn't exist before, which is to be part of a development site or part of an assemblage, I think you're going to start seeing over the next year to 3 years, you're going to see some opportunity on the development site assemblage that's going on.
Yeah, we are seeing it, Kent. Some of the tenants who unfortunately getting hammered by the virus are making people rethink, making owners rethink their long-term strategy. If they were going to retire and sell 5 years from now, I think you see this a lot with respect to a lot of things in the lifestyle and life planning during the virus. A lot of people have had their life accelerated by 5 years, where they probably would have gotten there anyway. But we thought that retail had bottomed out prior to the virus. I thought that the technology had killed the tenants they were going to kill, and we were going to be more focused on personal services tenants, and those are the ones the virus hit the most. But I think they'll be back, and I think the adjustment from the virus will be quick again. Nationally, a lot of mall owners that aren't big box, strip centers, supermarket anchored centers are experiencing pretty strong occupancy even through the virus. So I think the fundamentals of retail, people want to go out, and they're going to go out in numbers and be out shopping and be out hanging in bars and restaurants, and it'll snap back quickly, I think.
I hope so.
Like Kent mentioned before, the kind of millennial population, they were out partying, drinking, doing all kinds of stuff during this, and you're just looking wide-eyed at what are you doing? But those are people that no matter what, they want to go out, they want to enjoy themselves. And
when we get post-COVID, we're going to be thankfully, these people are going to come back and repopulate here. So you look at, New York City lost about 300,000 change of addresses, which may have been about almost 450,000 people. When you look at who left, half of those people were, restaurant workers, retail workers, and hotel workers. Whether it's the same people or not, they will be coming back to New York fairly quickly. And then you lost, probably 150,000 people or 275,000 people for real that moved out. But interestingly enough, 50% of them have moved within a 2-hour radius of New York City. So they either moved into, and these are change of addresses, so we don't know if it's temporary or not. But they moved that, these are people who kept their link to Manhattan, New York City, the boroughs. So whether they come back full time or not, we'll see. And that'll depend on school years, if they have children. But you start tracing out where everybody went. This isn't like everybody just picked up and moved to Texas and Florida. So it wasn't quite like that, thankfully.
And Ken, just to piggyback off of that, from our student housing portfolio, we're seeing a lot of optimism for the future in even the spring semester and the fall of 2021. We're noticing that students in that age group demographic are really hungry to get back to campuses, to get back with their communities in situations where they may not have in-person classes now. And even during COVID, where a lot of online classes are happening, we're seeing high levels of occupancy in those campuses, which is, indicative of, that optimism, that placing value on the fact of that interpersonal communication and those interactions. But, I think broadening that is, if that's a microcosm, I think broadening that to apply to a New York City type market where it's still very much a destination, location. I mean, who doesn't want to make it in New York City, right? That's not going to change just because of this. And in fact, it may be even more amplified because of the additional challenge that it's been facing in 2020. I know that, in talking with some other industry peers, that's still a conversation. Is people want to get into New York City. People want to move there, get work here, and live in the city. And that's definitely a really encouraging sign. They're just waiting for the right opportunities. And I think those opportunities will come back in a very broad way.
Well, Christian, I'll send last thoughts over to you, and then I'm going to pass it to Anthony for the Q&A. Would love to get your outlook from DMG on what you think 2021 is going to look like. Yeah, so as kind of the theme of the webinar, DMG Investments is extremely optimistic about 2021. We see a really exciting pipeline for both new development and also acquisitions. So that's kind of on our new business side, but for our current operations, still just seeing some really strong metrics for rebound and continued growth, both on the rental side and at One Park Condos, where we're selling, units at a very high rate right now. We're seeing, people matriculating from New York City, or they're looking for maybe a secondary location to have available to them. So we're still seeing that at One Park Condos, and that trend that we're seeing is likely to continue. So at DMG Investments, we're very optimistic. We're really excited at the growth opportunities that we have coming up. All right, that's a good note to end on. So Anthony, I'll pass it over to you for the Q&A. Thanks everybody for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. We have a question from John Marcos. And this question came in when Paul was speaking. What about factors such as de Blasio, Biden, no bail, safety, rise in taxes? And Paul, you can answer this as well as, both Paul and Kent, your thoughts.
Sure.
Go first, Ken.
Okay. So let's just take a look. The answer is yes, those all impact what's going on. So I'm going to take three things. Number one, what's going to make New York City strong and healthy and good? We need health safety, period. So New York City is the densest city in the United States with 28,000 people per square mile. San Francisco's number two with 17,000 people per square mile, and it falls precipitously off after that. So health safety, we need that. And good news for us, we have a vaccine, we have a second vaccine, and maybe a third vaccine will go forward. So somewhere in the April-May period of time, we may start regaining some stability and being able to go back out. So that's it. Number two, we need physical safety. We need cooperation between the police force, and we need cooperation with the civilian population. So there is no population, whether it's the NBA, the United States House of Representatives, every webinar there is no such thing as 100% purity in population. There are people that make mistakes. The police are no different. What the police have to do is recognize that 1%, 2%, whatever it is of their population aren't perfect people, and they have to accept it, recognize it, and deal with it. And secondly, the civilian population needs to say, no, all the police aren't bad. In fact, most of them are all good, but a couple people have made horrendous mistakes. And the civilian population and the police have to work together as a community, saying that we're out to do good things and they need to be supporting one another. That means not to defund police. You may even have to increase money to train people more. And the third thing we need, because of our density, when one of the strengths is transportation. We need $13 billion from the federal government. We need it soon to keep and maintain our public transportation. And then people say, why should the federal government give all New Yorkers all this money? Well, I'll put it this way. If Paul and I are in partnership together, and Paul is at home because he's smart and great and he's doing all these things, and I'm out on the street running around doing all the work, Paul says, oh, Kent, why don't you call here? Why don't you go there? But he's sitting back at home and getting 50% of everything I get because we're partners, and I'm out in the street and doing the work. And then I break my leg, and all of a sudden I'm in the hospital. My guess is, because I'm making a lot of money for Paul, he probably will pick up the phone and say, hey, Kent, I hope you feel better. He may even actually come visit me with flowers. And he may even say, what can I do to get you back on the street as quickly as you can so I can get my 50%? Well, so Paul's the federal government, right? New York City pays an enormous amount of money in taxes, much more than we get to the federal government. So if New York City breaks its leg, the federal government should be stepping in here and saying, what can we do to make you feel better and get better as quickly as you can so you can give us more money? Now, if you're Kentucky, where you're getting 100 times more than you're paying out, you break your leg, you know what? I'll send a note, but that's it, right? I'm going to be relieved because I don't have to keep paying you all this money. New York is a driving force. So federal government needs to recognize that we are a driver. We spend an enormous amount of money into the federal coffers, and they need, when we get hurt, to help us. And that's what we need right now. With those three things, I think that New York is going to go great. And we need a mayor, a person who has an understanding of that and can speak to the community. Such as an example, there's a guy, Eric Adams. Here's a guy who was beaten up by police when he was young, right? So he wasn't a black leader now. Wasn't thrilled when he was beaten up. And what did he do? He joined the police force for 22 years, rose to captain. I mean, so he can speak into the black population, he can speak into the blue population, right? Which is the police. And at least when people are speaking to one another and listening, you have a shot. So regardless of policies, you need somebody first who's accepted by all the population bases and can work with people and be listened by that. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, that was great, Kent. Paul, you were going to run for mayor, and I guess you did. What would you have done differently compared to de Blasio right now?
Let's just say that we have a super leadership opportunity ahead of us now. The election is coming up in November. De Blasio is termed out, so it'll be someone new. And there are a whole bunch of great candidates that are emerging. Sean Donovan, who worked with Bloomberg and in the Obama administration, has thrown his hat into the ring. Ray McGuire, a Citibank vice chair, is considering running. Andrew Yang, who was a pretty great presidential candidate, is considering jumping in too. So I think all that's really great because we have so much opportunity in this city to help the million kids that are in our public school system, be a business-friendly city, attracting tenants, unlike the way that we didn't embrace Amazon. And I think, again, we have a housing shortage. So what are we going to do about that so we can help folks who we need to support, so that we're not a barbell society full of wealthy folks and folks that are worse off with no middle class. So we want to be a city where everyone can live. And I think we'll likely have a mayor who will be much more capable of addressing the things that are all important to us.
Thank you, Paul. Hey, Ken Romalik. Ken, with the Facebook example, do you see an oversupply of office space in the city and tri-state area for years to come? Are there areas of commercial real estate that are doing better than others? If so, what are the asset classes are doing better in this the COVID era?
So right now we're in an environment that we're not expanding, clearly, because we've got a problem. So roughly right now we're at 12.5% vacancy rate or availability rate, plus or minus. So it's been the highest it has for quite some time. In that marketplace, 26% of all of the office space available today is sublet space. So that tells, and it's the highest it's ever been. So that tells you that there are a lot of companies that are hurting and putting their place out for rent. So do we have overabundance of space? I don't think we have an overabundance of space, but we certainly have a tenant favorable marketplace right now. As an example, one of my companies is in the building right now at 444 Madison. It takes typically 2,000 people a day go in the building. The other day we had 88 people, right? Helmsley Spear and Falcon Pacific made up a fair amount of those 88 people. So yes, there's a problem out there right now. And there'll be an adjustment over the years, over a period. I don't think that we're going to have an issue with that. I don't think we've had overbuilding per se. I think we do have a problem because of COVID and people re-examining how they want to have office space, what they want to do, and it'll take a year or so or more to adjust. But I'm optimistic of what New York is doing. And there are some people saying, people are moving out of major cities. So, you can get somebody moving out with their quote headquarters out of New York City on paper because they're going to be paying a different price in taxes in a state like Florida or Texas, but they're not moving all their people out of here. They're going to still have a lot of people. They're still going to be doing a lot of work. New York City is New York City. We still have a population of over 8 million people, and we matter. So, yes, there are cycles, and we're not in a cycle where it's booming for the landlords. And maybe that gives more opportunity to some of the tenants who can afford rent a little bit and give them a little bit of ease as we go into the marketplace.
Thank you, Quinn. Thanks, Ken. Brendan Cohen, with regards to the revised PIDE and tax proposal in Albany that's discriminating only New York City PIDE and TARE of the market value of $300,000, an annual tax of approximately 10% of the market value excess of over $300,000. What is your network intel and concern about the flood of apartments on the market? And this could be, I guess, Christian.
That's one I'll have to rely on some better intel on. That's not something that is in the forefront of our lens right now.
Well, the pied-à-terre tax is not a good thing, right? And the concept is that somebody is wealthy and buying an apartment in New York, and therefore there should be a higher tax on that person. The reverse idea is this: if you have a person with a pied-à-terre, right, so they're not in New York full time, they're paying their taxes, they're paying their utilities, they're paying all of the things, and they're paying for their public school tax, all the stuff that go along with that, and yet they're not using any of the services. So another way to look at it is that they're already paying a disproportionate share of services that they are not using. So it's actually a benefit to us to have pied-à-terres in New York, because we've got people who don't live here participating in society and paying money into our society and our city without utilizing all of those services. So the problem is New York City needs, New York State both need more money. And I've always found that, same as children, if you incentivize people and you incentivize your children, it becomes a lot easier than when you try to punish your way through changing behavior. So if we're looking to change behavior, we're looking to raise taxes, to get more money, you don't always need to raise taxes. I think it was criminal what happened with Amazon not going in to Queens, for instance. So, they wanted to punish Amazon. Everybody said, oh my gosh, look at that. They're not going to pay real estate taxes for 10 years. They're going to get $1 billion of free taxes. Well, nobody looked at the fact that 6 of the 7 sites that Amazon was going to occupy are already owned by the city and have not received taxes in almost 50 years. So what did we give away? We gave away nothing because we're not collecting anything. And now that thankfully Amazon didn't come, we're still collecting nothing on 6 of those 7 sites. That was a joke. So people like, no offense, but AOC, who went and just viscerally went and said this is a bad thing because this industry are uneducated, poorly viewing and hurting their own community. And that is not smart. So yes, we need some tax benefits, but we need to be intelligent in the way we approach this stuff with our shortfalls.
Thank you, Ken.
I think I agree with that. The city and the state so mishandled that. And what did Amazon do? They were making $1.4 million office commitment. They backed out, and 6 months later started acting like an ordinary commercial tenant. And how much space have they taken? 2 million, without any need to subsidize education, jobs the way they were. So Amazon's got to be looking at New York City and thinking that they did them a huge favor. And
also,
so
they didn't get 25,000 new jobs in Queens where they needed it. They came into Manhattan, and that's where the city was foolish.
Yeah. So I mean, Amazon needs to be in New York. It's making, besides its last mile delivery acquisitions, which are massive around the boroughs, they need to be here. Facebook needs to be here. So I think when people think about the market long term being difficult on the office side, I don't think so. I think it's like, it's another example of a different type of tragedy where we had 9/11. A lot of companies were very nervous and wanted to have duplicate headquarters outside New York, New Jersey, Stamford, no offense to any of those markets. But 2 years later, the real estate industry made a fortune bringing those companies back to New York City. Same thing's going to happen now.
Guys, this is actually, we're at our end right now. Many of you that did not have your questions answered, we will definitely copy them, send them to the guys, and then they will answer you guys back privately. Christian, before we conclude, tell us a little bit about, you see, I have about 4 or 5 webinars coming in the future, especially Westchester County, Connecticut. They're talking about of course, that number that Kent mentioned about that 300,000 people leaving the city. But a lot of those guys are not only leaving the city to live, but they're also leaving the city to work, especially White Plains and in Connecticut as well. Can you tell us a little bit about, maybe you and Taryn could just finish this last question and tell us, what are you seeing in New Jersey right now, just right over the river? Are a lot of people coming into your new buildings at DMG Investment Properties in New Jersey?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. And thanks to all our panelists today. Just great conversation and dialogue. So I appreciate you all. And thank you for Richard for moderating. What we're seeing is we are seeing matriculation has been well documented from New York City out into kind of dispersing in the areas. And at One Park, our main condo building right on the edge there of the Gold Coast, we are seeing increased interest and trending more positively to living situations that where it's more they can it's less dense because it's not in the city, but they can still commute very easily, and they are still within striking distance basically of New York City. And we're seeing that that's something that's very important to our consumers still, is they want to be close enough where they can get there if they need to, but they don't want to live there right now. So that's something that we're still monitoring and still seeing, because, as we transition out of, and, after everyone has the vaccine, we've got this herd immunity or whatever that means as we move forward, those individuals who moved away, but not far enough that they can't commute, are going to start commuting back to the city. We're going to see that shift go back, and, the 9 to 5 shift will go back into the city and occupying those office spaces, supplying those restaurants. And so we're seeing that people are moving away, but they're not moving so far away that they can't still get there. And so that's something that we're really excited to see. And I think it's going to create a lot of opportunities in New York City, as everyone's mentioned, for kind of a new wave of population to move in there at some really exciting opportunities and price points.
Great. Taryn, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing right now with this kind of mass exodus of Manhattan, it's temporary. It's, that frenzy mentality like everyone had with toilet paper. They're freaking out and going and buying suburban houses because they're like, oh my gosh, we need to get out there now. The city's never coming back. Let's have this conversation again in a year or two and see how many of those people are putting their houses up for sale because the commute is too much and they can't take it, or God forbid the other millions of things that could happen. There's going to be a lot of changes in familial status, I'm sure, from commutes and all of those other things, people needing pied-a-terres in Manhattan because they've moved 2 hours away to Connecticut or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how the dynamics change. And with all of these types of situations, there's opportunities, and how people take advantage of those opportunities is to each their own. And I'm excited to see where we go in terms of development, both residential, commercial, and otherwise.
Oh, that's great, Taryn. And I'm just going to ask this one more question to Paul. Paul, you have a brokerage business. Are your teams doing more deals? Are you seeing a lot of businesses, especially retail, going into the boroughs, going to Westchester, Connecticut? Are you seeing more stuff leaving? And are you helping those clients?
No, I think most people are, committed to New York in terms of the long term. I think we're selling. It's interesting. We're selling development sites. Again, I already mentioned this, but that have pretty healthy numbers in the boroughs. We're also, any industrial property or anything that could be last mile delivery, we're selling at the asking price. There's a spike in that segment of the market, which I don't think is going to let up. So we probably just don't have enough product in that category at the moment. But that'll change. And on the multifamily side, we need to work out what's going to happen with rent regulations. That was another opportunity for the city to shoot itself in the foot. By not allowing people to raise rents and fix up buildings. I think that the net result of that will be that you're going to have major budget holes besides what the virus will produce on the multifamily side, because half the city's operating budget, the $97 billion, comes from taxes on those buildings. So we need to get together with the folks in Albany and fix the rent regulations so that the underpinning and the most important revenue generator for the city is back in business.
Great. Guys, I'm just going to finish off with Ken. And again, everybody where I did not answer your question, we'll copy it, and we will definitely have people respond back to you. Ken, Brian Rothschild, what about all of the financial companies that say they will permanently work remotely? How are we filling that space?
Thankfully, in my opinion, we won't have to fill that space. They won't be working remotely fully. Will home officing be incorporated in as part of our society and our work environment? I think yes, it will to some extent. But even the most, I don't want to say mundane, but even the most straightforward mathematical calculations, people who do accounting and go through a cycle like that, don't operate as well and as efficiently being remote. We found accounting people were making mistakes. They forget to close out a book for a month or whatever it is. They're problems. So it's not as efficient, and it doesn't really work as well. So will we have short-term office space availability now that's in excess of what we had? We were 9% vacancy. We're up to almost 13% vacancy now. Yes, that's a result of the COVID environment and its detrimental impact in our society and our economy and our business. But I don't think that we're looking at a fundamental change that everybody's going to be working now from home and offices are going to be obsolete. So I don't think that's going to happen. And those companies that did move out ultimately found that they weren't as efficient, they weren't as creative. And that's why the companies like Amazon and Facebook and Google and all these other companies come into New York, because the young people want to be here, the energy is here, vitality is here, creativity, etc. And so I'm not cautiously foolish, but I am cautiously optimistic that office space is going to be a part of our fabric of our economy.
Thank you, Ken. Guys, this concludes the Winter Webinar Series with DMG Investments, and I want to thank our sponsors, DMG Investments. I also want to thank of course, our panelists, Christian and Taryn and Richard and Paul and Kent. You guys were all fantastic. Once again, also like to thank all the registrars and all the attendees that registered today. So thank you. And this concludes everything. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Well done, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Nice to see you.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Be safe.